We're going to see it as I laid it down, and I'll be able to talk and answer your questions. If you could put the questions in the Q&A section, I'll read those and be able to answer whatever you got. There's no taboo questions. They're whatever you need to know. What colors I'm mixing, what paint I'm using, what size brushes, any of that stuff. Just go ahead and ask, and we'll have a relaxed 1 hour here, and we'll go through 3 paintings that I did, and they're pretty small. They're just for me, sort of for my portfolio, stuff I'm working on and stuff I love, and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm going to turn my camera off so we can get some better bandwidth there. All right, so if everybody's set to go, I'm going to turn on Q&A, move this to the side here. If you don't know who I am, my name is Greg Manchess, and I've been an illustrator since the dawn of time now, many decades. And I worked at a studio in the beginning, and after 2 years, I went off and started freelancing, and I've been on my own ever since. I have had agents in the past and worked with them, and now I'm just on my own. So let me get this thing started, and I'll take a look at the questions. Just before I start, basically what you're looking at is a sketch based on the reference up here on the top left of Commander Bowman from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is one of my all-time favorite films. This is the finished painting on the left. I want to make it bigger for you, but we need bandwidth for this demo area. Let me hit go. And I loosely sketched the painting, the photo reference there. And the eyes in. Yeah, I projected it, but I did not put all the details in, as you can see. I just used major areas, you know, like a jawline, or where the nose is, or where the pupil of the eye is, stuff like that. So here's some questions coming up. I have been enjoying the expo this weekend. It's been amazing. Incredible artwork going on, and incredible artwork being shared. What do I look for when choosing a reference? Well, this was kind of a personal thing. So I've been wanting to paint this for a long time. It's kind of a test right now to test using a brush with the palette knife back and forth. Something I've been doing for a while. And I saw those reflections on his face mask as marks made by a palette knife, and then the flesh areas of his face would be done with a brush, a little bit of palette knife. So you can see I'm laying in all the darks here, but think of this as under the top layer of skin. So I'm going to lay those final brush marks on the top layer of his skin. So I have to set it up. So here I am laying in the darker colors underneath the colors that get built upon. And then I stack the paint on top of that. How to properly layer the paint, that's something I have trouble with. The thing is to think of it a little bit like, I know you're not going to believe this, but Photoshop, those layers, think of the layer underneath the skin would probably be a little darker. Then the next layer that you put in your list, your layer list, is going to go on top of that. And then you're going to do another layer on top of that. Sometimes you brush through the layers. Sometimes you don't. You build up the pigment on your brush and you lay it on top gently so it doesn't pierce through. Well, you see, I'm going back and forth on a lot of this. I'm using the edge of my brush now on the fat side of the brush to get some edges going, to get the plane of the face going. In other words, I'm cutting across the planes of the face. I'm not following the things on the face. Like if you see my cursor, up here on the nose and stuff, I'm not following too much of that as much as I'll be cutting around it, cutting into it, if that makes sense. Whenever I paint, my colors always turn out muddy. Yeah. I just put up a couple of posts on muddycolors.com. If you're not familiar with that, it's an amazing website with about 20 artists on there. Dan DeSantos runs that, and I contribute a bunch of posts called 10 Things. Just did 2 in the past month on color. And especially the one last Wednesday, usually is my beat. And I put up a list of mixing and how to mix. 10 things about mixing colors. So I put up recipes about flesh color and all that, and the kind of color pigments that I'm mixing, and the recipe for those. And I think you'd find that really informative. It's all very practical. What you see is what you get when it's mixing. I just watched some of the Jim Gurney stuff today, which was really phenomenal. The Triad of Colors palette, which is great. I can have a small palette of colors, or I can have an expanded palette of colors. You'll see that in the post. You don't really want to prevent mixing mud, because you're going to come back to mud. A sophisticated understanding of mixing mud colors is what you're going to do as a painter. Those pure colors is something everybody can do, but not everybody can mix those mud colors. Now, in the beginning, they do mix mud colors, but that's what you're going to come all the way around and back to. If you see on some of these colors I'm mixing right now, a little muddy. I mean, the face always, a painting always starts out pretty ugly. It goes through an ugly stage, I've always said. And you got to think about that ugly stage underneath when the stuff you're going to come back with on top to put in that fresh color. So you can see me cutting across the nose there and across under the eyes. And I'm moving all around the face because I'm balancing out those values and judging the muddy colors that I get when I don't mean to mix it, and some of the muddy colors when I do mean to mix it. So some of that flesh underneath is a little muddy. And then you put fresh color on top, and it looks wonderful. I think that's the best I can answer on that, Grace. How do I choose the underpainting and colors? I'll start with better catch up. There's a lot of questions coming in. I start with a grade down mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And you mix those two at different levels, and you'll get a warm gray or a cool gray. And that's generally what I start with. I use acrylic to seal the pencil to the board. I'll use that gray to cover it. And then once that's dry, then I start laying in the color on top of that. Graph artist, you sketch with paint. You can go either way. Anonymous. You can, I've come back to sketching with a pencil more. I used to not seal the pencil off, and it was horrible because the paint would mix with the pencil. I get these gray, muddy colors, So I seal the pencil off. But I've done pencil just straight, and now I can deal with the muddy color. Because after decades of painting, you challenge yourself in many ways. You see what you can get away with, and you can get yourself worked into corners. Because of all the time you put into it, you can work your way out of those corners. Because it's the difference between muddy color and fresh color, and you go back and forth on that. It's not really a direct route all the time. How do you think you developed your orthodox magical way of painting? Thank you, Kipling. it was built over time. I started out like you guys. I was in agony when I first started painting. I wanted to be a painter because I wanted to show and tell stories about like the ones that inspired me. And I'm sure you guys are similar to that. And when I started out, it was horrifying. I got muddy colors instantly. I got the worst color possible. I had no ideas about layers. I still have a painting rolled up somewhere. My first painting when I went to my abysmal art school, and it had a stroke on there that just happened out of the blue, and I loved it, and I thought that's everything I want to do in that stroke. I spent the next 30 years trying to get to that, back to that stroke. It didn't take 30 years, but it was always kind of a magical thing to push for. It's being painted on the gesso board that you get, that manufactured board at the art store. And I love that stuff. It's great. But I love a solid surface instead of the bounce of a canvas. I'm not crazy about that. You see me putting those blue spots in there of color, right? I laid those on top, and you can see they didn't mix with the paint underneath, and they stayed fairly fresh. But I'll probably leave those there. Now I'm working with a palette knife. You can see to come back in. I've set up enough on the face that now I want to start to lay in some of those colors with the palette knife, or work on the eyes, one or the other. Palette setup in medium. I use Gamblin products now. Gamsol and Galkid. They're brilliant. I love them. The thing with mixing the paint, applying the medium, you only want to apply enough medium to just loosen the paint to the point where you're comfortable with it. Because honestly, you can use the paint straight out of the tube if you want, if it works for you. You're going to discover these things on your own, and also by listening to and watching these demos like mine, and listen to other guys' demo, and you're going to build confidence as you go. At a certain point, and if you read that those 2 posts I did on color, you'll realize it's your process you're trying to find. You're not trying to find my process or somebody else's. That took me years to figure out. But I found my process by listening to others talk about and demonstrate their process. And of course, when I started out, nobody did demonstrations like they do today. Like you guys share everything. We didn't share anything. We didn't want anybody to know how we came across with this stuff. But I got to say, I learned through the younger generations coming up to the field about how to share and how to discuss and how to push forward with these things, and to share methods that we all know and love, and how we can help each other get better. That is a remarkable development in the illustration and art world. Maybe not so much in fine art, but definitely in illustration. Do you go to your darkest darks? Oh, hey, Agam, how you doing, man? You going for your darkest darks? I do. I do leave a little wiggle room, as you can see there, and in this one. And I went to the black pretty quickly on those top bars above his face in the reference and stuff. But I do leave a little room, not too much, but a lot. That sounds contradictory, I know. Would you recommend for starting with lighting references and canvas? I wouldn't start with a rough canvas. I would start with a smooth canvas so that it accents your brushwork, so you can study that. Lighting is anything that balances warm and cool. So I have an old style couple of Luxo lamps with a tube of fluorescent light in there with a 60-watt bulb in the center. And the balance between those two is close enough. And then I love to paint in daylight in my studio. At night, I have the lamps going. You'll get close enough. The idea of getting close enough is really important. because you're going to adjust. This painting is never finished. I could go back into this painting in a number of places to solve some things or to add a stroke here or there. But all your paintings will never be completely finished. It is true, you tend to walk away from them. You tend to abandon them because they can always be worked on. It is in oil paint, Francisco, to start from the darks to the lights, and build the pigment up. That's the best. And watercolor, it's the opposite. You set up your lights and work to the darks, which watercolor is difficult. You have to have a lot of pre-planning. Oil painting, not so much. You can mess this thing up and still keep going. And I mean, look at how sloppy this stuff is. And it's fun once you know what you're doing with the slop. Thanks, Brian. Glad you're here, man. Okay, so we are finished with that one. I'm going to keep your questions up. And you can see, I'll leave this up for a second here. You can study some of the brush strokes. This is straight out of the tube, red, cadmium red light. Some of the other, most of everything else is mixed. This is a pretty straight white. There's a little bit more pigment in there than the video was showing. But let's go to the next screen here. Hang on one second, as I have to go back and get this up into the, okay, there we go. All right, sorry, I'll start this in 1 second. Let me get rid of the Q&A on that screen and we'll be right over here. Okay, we're gonna go. You guys can see this okay, I hope. And I'll hit the questions. Okay. Get them, the drawing stops at the, how do I manage the edges? You can see, this is a good question, right? The edges take time to understand. They come from doing a ton of painting, obviously. But one of the reasons I work with this palette knife now is to, on this one, it's palette knife first. The reason for the palette knife is it gives me randomness that you can't necessarily get with a brush. The palette knife I hate. It's horrible. It is very hard to control. But man, when you want random stuff, the palette knife is premier for that. And so I got myself into a job where I needed to be very, very loose, looser than how I am now. And so I broke out the palette knife, and suddenly in the middle of an assignment, I started to understand how to use the knife and what I could do with it. And it allowed a level of randomness that I was looking for. Now, in this particular one of Alien, oh, I'm sorry, let me get these. Here's the reference, and then here's the finished painting. It allowed a level of randomness that I can go back into with the brush. So I paint with that palette knife for a while, as you can see. And build it up, and I obliterate my drawing along the way. I lose the drawing. So no matter how much you trace this stuff off or project it, it doesn't matter. Let me just say yet again, tracing is not cheating. You can read any number of my posts on Muddy Colors about that. You can see, look, I'm obliterating the drawing. I've used it as a guide only. Website for oil painters. You're going to set up an Oily Fans account. It's a good idea, Jason. I should do that. I've been wanting to connect certain art departments in colleges around the country to one site so that students can share between California and New York and Minnesota and Florida and whatever. And people say, yeah, but they can do that now on the internet. Yeah, but when you have a site where everyone can go, the conversations tend to gravitate to that one place instead of scatter. Anyway, yeah, I think that would be great. Pushing through the ugly stage, it's about a ton of patience. You have to have the patience. I know you get discouraged. And believe me, at this stage with the alien creature here, I was like, oh my God, am I blowing this one? Holy cow. I mean, look at this ugly mess. What am I doing? What's my name? Where did I come from? All that stuff happens in your head. You got to shut that guy up. You do have to do it enough where you can build the confidence and realize that once it looks like it's going to hell in a handbasket, you're going to pull it out and adjust and modify. And it may not be matching exactly what you have in your head. You certainly don't want it to match the reference. You're not just painting the reference. You're making a painting. This is an expression of what you love about the reference. I mean, this is what I'm trying to do here, is express what I love about the shape of that freaking alien head that Giger nailed so long ago. Write with oil or learn another medium first. I drew first, always drawing first. It's always about the drawing. But the sooner you can get to the paint, the better. But what I'm doing here, let me clarify this, Mariana, is that I'm drawing with the paint. I'm drawing planes with the paint. I'm drawing depth with the paint. I'm modifying the depth with the paint. But it's all drawing. So I started a lot with the drawing. And then I wouldn't start with watercolor, very tough medium. I would go straight to paint. If you feel more comfortable with acrylic, that's kind of a blend between the two. That should work really well. And don't forget, once you paint the acrylic for a while, you could go back in with oil and paint on top of that. You make a mistake, wipe it off, you still got that acrylic painting underneath. How do you decide where to stop? The age-old question, Joe. An energy of brushstrokes. Wow, these are good questions. How do you decide? Wow, it takes many, many paintings. You're going to discover a lot in each painting, but you discover much more in, say, 20 paintings. And you've got to do that. You've got to knock out 20 paintings and then make it 50 and then make it 70. And after a while, I looked around my studio. I was surrounded by hundreds of paintings. So the decision is, how do I want it to look at the end? What does that final layer look like in my mind? So I'm going to keep this stuff up here, this gooey reflection stuff. I don't go into that much. I think I might toward the end, just to adjust a little bit. I like the way it looks. I want to keep it loose to the degree that it describes two things. The element I'm trying to capture, the realism of it, and the stroke. You want to leave the stroke to describe the realism. So if the stroke is loose and nice, but it tells me what these round things look like in here, then that's good. If I need a little detail, I can go in to help with that. But you want to step back at some point and decide how much brushwork you want to be identifiable and how much you don't want to be identifiable. Like these softer areas in the front of the head or the nose are softer than some of the other strokes. Those ones, the strokes that are sharp will come forward, and the strokes that are soft will lay back. And I mean in depth, you know. Made, sold in the fine art market. No, I have in the fine art market. I want to do much more in the fine art market. And I think as illustrators today, we should all think about not only illustrating, but painting, as like Da Vinci or any of those guys did, you know. Paint for yourself, paint in galleries, paint for assignment. Just paint, do all of it. Do an animation and then do an oil painting. Why not, right? We're illustrators. We speak in visual imagery and we tell stories with the paint. And so I think painting in a gallery world and painting in the illustration world should not be at each other's throat. We should do them both. We learn from both, and people can find us in both. I have a gallery in Paris I work with, Gallery Daniel McGann. Fabulous place. They love my work, I love them, and I'm working on a show for them right now. Favorite painters to learn from? I'm curious who influenced you. Frank Duveneck was the guy that influenced me the most for oil painting. Besides, the obvious guys, Sargent, Zorn, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, all the classic guys like that. But Zorn and Gustav Klimt and a lot of those guys. Then there's a limitless list of illustrators, Robert Abbott and John Schoner, and especially Bernie Fuchs and Mark English and Robert Heidel. And I had the privilege to work with Gary Kelly at the studio days when I started out. And Bill Erskine and Rick Farrell and Tom Buchwalder and Nancy, I forgot her last name. Anyway, these were incredible artists, and I watched what they did, and I mimicked what they did, and that's how I learned. J.W. Waterhouse, Frazetta, Jeff Jones, all those guys. Should practice to get better at just go for it. It's a combination of practice and go for it, I think, Anonymous. You go for it much easier once you've practiced. And I don't like to call it practice as much. We tend to think of practice as just doing it rotely. I call it focused training, because when you hear the word training, you think of an Olympic athlete, right? That guy is training, as opposed to that guy's practicing. So when you train, every time you paint, you're at this level that I'm showing you now. You're at this level of focus. You're 100%. If you can't get to 100% before you start, go take a walk, go eat something, go relax, build yourself up. But be at 100% when you start. And when you begin to paint early on, you're going to be trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Just take it slow. Lay the stroke down. Here's the thing. Lay it down, leave it there. Don't fuss too much with it. If you notice in this, I'm laying a stroke down, and I'm moving away. I'm looking at it. I'm leaving it there. It might not be perfect. It might come back. No, see, I'm back up there again. Like I said, I probably messed with that. But I'm keeping it kind of loose, you see. Do you enjoy working on smaller sizes? Yeah, I've been challenged by this, Brian, with these are 5 inches square here. This one is. And it really gets tight in these little tiny areas of the alien head. And I thought, why am I doing this? I'm insane. Look how many times I'm capturing this stuff up here. It's not important to capture it exactly because it'll draw the eye up there. So I'm trying to figure out, look at that, I scraped it all off again. Trying to figure out how much of that do I want to show through and how much not. The focus has to be down here toward the brain of the alien, I guess. And then I can use these smaller studies to learn how to paint large or bigger, I guess. Grisaille underpaintings. Here's the thing about grisaille. It seems like a really good idea, and you can do that. It would be fun. What happens when you nail all the values in one color underneath, you use it as a guide that you think is a dummy guide. Notice now that I've come in with the brush and I've lost all that work because it feels better that way, to me anyway. And then I come back in to sharpen some of that. It makes you feel, with an underpainting like that, you tend to leave it as something not to mess with. And you tend to go brain dead about your values because you think, well, they're down there. If I just match them, then I'll have the painting. But you have to think value all the way through the painting, all the way through, from front to back, top to bottom, beginning to end. So, I mean, do it or don't do it, but remember that you're always constantly working on your values. How do you figure the amount of detail you need, want to add versus how workable the oils are, layer after layer? Yeah, I'm starting to discover that I can leave. Oops, I got to get this. Why is this doing that? Okay, there it is. I'm starting to leave some places to dry and then going back in and getting them wet again. So I'm still experimenting and still learning with that, MC, and I think you will too. Uh, the amount of detail, if I get too detailed, I go back in and break it up. But if I need a little bit of detail in a field of crazy wild brushwork, you won't notice that as much. You'll be looking at the brushwork. You won't notice the details as much. Now that is a dead giveaway right there. So think about that and then take that to the bank. Like chromatic over a dark without getting mud. You can build layers that are dry and you tend to get less mud. Oh, here we are going in close. Let's get to this. Here we go. Sorry, guys. There we go. And you can see some cat hair on there. I got to brush off and you can see how thick. You can see the paint strokes slipping through there. Some things are accented and I leave them. So Agam, to get back to your question, is that just a matter of not being heavy-handed, developing that touch through settle time? Good. I love that, settle time. That's great. Yeah, you have to be delicate. You want to know how much paint is going down at any time. So if you paint a big gob of paint in the beginning, you're going to be dealing with that gob constantly throughout the process. It's okay if you find a way to do that. That's all right. But it's usually fat over lean is what they say. So you're painting very thinly in the beginning. And wow, I could even show you that right here. Let's go back. Boom. Very much thin on this. You can see, right, how thin the paint is. The brown is thick, but I can scrape through it with a palette knife. A little bit more on there. This is quite thin in here. This is quite thick. But I'm not trying to make this thin again, because if I were to do that, I would have to scrape some of that pigment off. Hopefully that makes sense. A lot of this is thin in here, but once I get to this stage, now the paint is thickening up. And then it's thick enough for me to go in and smash some brush strokes through there, which gives it a lot of movement too. So let me come back in a second. We're going to go to our third and final demo, and I'll get that started right when I pull the questions up. There we go. Good. And let's get this started. This is Deckard from Blade Runner. And I did a post about this on Muddy Colors as well. And you can see, Agam, I'm starting in thin again with the darks. And I feel like I'm wasting paint. Any advice to get over that? Caitlin, I wish I did. I'm telling you, I keep trying to paint thicker and thicker all the time. You want to believe that you're wasting pigment. Don't allow yourself to worry about wasting pigment. Waste it. Waste away. Blow that pigment. That's all I can say. Because if you don't, you'll end up wishing you could paint thicker and thicker. And sometimes I get to the solution in a painting much too quickly, because I've just put it down and it looks really good, but I think it's too thin and I want to thicken it up. And then I got to blast it apart again and get some more pigment on there, because I'm always thinking of that final layer. What does that look like? What does that look like? Now you'll see some of these strokes that went in the face in here, they'll be there toward the end. You can identify them subtly over here in places. It'll be a little bit more obvious in a little bit. I hope I'm answering a lot of questions you guys are asking a lot, which is great. I love this. to use gouache. Gouache is remarkable. Yes, Cameron, definitely get into some gouache. It's great because it has a wonderful watercolor feel and a thickness feel at the same time. So, along with the acrylics, try some gouache. I would. I think gouache is wonderful. And then watch everything that Nathan Folks does. He's brilliant with that. Some point while you're painting, do you stop looking at the reference? Absolutely. The reference is a guide. You are not reproducing a photograph. You're not reproducing your reference. You are making a painting. This painting resembles at best the photograph. I'm saying what I love about this shot of Deckard with my painting. I love painting over those forms and showing those forms that I look at when I see this reference. Is it the reference? No. Is it the photo? Not at all. Do I want to come away with a photo? Not in the least. This is a painting, and it is an expression of this photo, and you have to remember that, because if you don't, you'll get suckered into the photograph. And when you get suckered in, it is a black hole. You will spin around the event horizon, and it will suck you in until you're copying a photograph. And then all the life in your paint will die instantaneously, and you will never live again. And anyway, I'm kidding. So at the end, I stopped looking at the reference, definitely. And many times during the paint, I don't look at it at all. How do you manage the loose and the sharp brush strokes on the painting? Side of the brush, tip of the brush, angle of the brush, load of the brush, pressure of the brush. I did a Muddy Colors post on that. 10 things about working with a brush. I think you'll love reading that. Loose ones without messing everything up. Yeah. The reason I showed these demos is because they look like hell, Anonymous. They're messed up. And you can see how I pull it out to come to the end as an expression of what I meant to do. You see, I'm messing all this is, I'm destroying what I'm putting down there. It's a mess all along. And sometimes I worry about, oh my God, this is really going bad. What am I doing? Holy crap. And I eventually, with patience, I go, okay, slow down, take a look, study, take a look at the reference. What's the paint doing? Calm down, and then get back into it. But not so much into it that I double back into detail. Too much detail, but you'll see. I'm going to correct this eyebrow at the end. You'll see that. Right now, you see it's not matching very well. But there's an expression in Harrison Ford's eye that I wanted to capture in the paint. So I will go into some detail there. What were you saying? Loose ones without messing up. Yeah, you're in control. So whatever's messy is up to you. Whatever is not messy is up to you, and you will control it as you learn more and more. But my suggestion is put it down and look at it. Don't start messing with it. This time lapse makes it look like I'm just flying in there, but there were some moments that I cut out in this time lapse where I just sat and looked at it. And that's what you want to do. Tell us the best advice from Kelly you ever got that you ignored. Tommy, how you doing, man? Good question. I ignored what Gary said for many, many years, and then came back to it. And that is push. He said to me a number of times when I was at the studio, push it one more level, push it one more level. I kept doing that. It was irritating. I had to leave the studio and go out on my own as a freelancer to get away from that. And then later on, I realized what he was talking about. And pushing myself constantly to go another step forward, to take another risk. And remember, it's only a risk if you don't take it. And so more and more, I take the risk. And this, working with a palette knife on a very small space, 5 inches square, is murder. But I had to do it. If I can paint this small and like this, then I can paint large. It's not a problem. I'm going to move on, Tommy. I hope that helped anyway. Sorry. Not about technique, but how do you get to the work and get out there? How do you get the work and get it out there, Joe? Well, how do you get the work and get out there? I mean, it's really all about online media anymore. I mean, there's no question about putting it out there, but you have to pick your clients and then focus on them and paint for them. I know it sounds terrible, but you paint for them in the beginning. I used to paint to get work from Omni Magazine. I made an entire portfolio that focused on one client, and I went out to New York and brought the portfolio in. And what was fun was actually they bought a painting off that first portfolio. I had a painting in there they loved, and they paid me to use it for second rights on that. I could go on and on about that, but I want to try to get to as many of your questions as I can. We have about 15 minutes left. What do you suggest? Oh, when things are going in the wrong direction, how do you problem solve your own work? First, you got to stop. You just have to stop. Don't keep putting pigment down thinking it's going to change, because that pigment will do exactly what you tell it to do. It'll go down ugly because you told it to go down ugly. So you got to stop. You got to slow down. You got to study where you're going. Mix some fresh color and put it somewhere on your palette. I'm sorry, on the painting where you know it needs to be, and leave it there. Doesn't have to be perfect. Put some fresh color down. Then go to another area. Put some fresh color down. Good, clean color. Because probably what's going on is it looks like a mess like this, and there's gray tones and muddy colors all over. Go for some fresh color somewhere, and then relax and study it. Study your reference, compare, go back, put in a short stroke, stop, look at it, sit back, study it. You know, N.C. Wyeth would study for a long time before he would mix a color and wildly run up the painting and slapdash a couple times, and then he'd stop and look at it for a long time. Do you have any routines you could share with us? What's a day in life for Greg like? Oh my God. Jason. I get up very early these days, about 6:30, and I read or I write. And then around about 10 o'clock, I try to dive into my work after I've answered a few emails. Email is the bane of my existence. I mean, it's good to talk to people, but come on, it's coming out of the woodwork on that stuff. So you have to cut it off for a while. Then I like to paint the rest of the day if I can. And then in the evening, I tend to read again and then go back to painting. Or I sit at a coffee shop when there was no COVID and write or read. To be successful in the illustration industry is the ability to render to hyper-realism necessary. Ray, that is an excellent question, as all of these questions are. Listen, you don't have to do it this way, but I'll tell you what, I learned so much from detail. Hyper-realism. I learned so much about that, about being loose to get to this stage. Ask Carla about it. Carla went and studied tons of realism. So did Cynthia Shepard. So did most of the artists I know. They studied realism. Some of it hyper-realism. Extremely hyper-realism. And came out of it being able to paint loosely. So if you want to paint loose, the way to that, two ways. One, understand realism, and two, just get to the loose. Just start doing it. And between the two, you'll find a balance point. Hey, Ev, how you doing, man? It's been a long time. And always great to hear. Yeah. How do you go about photographing, scanning? Oh my God, I use a professional for that. I do. I get to a lab. I go to a scanner. in Queens. Oh, here I am. I just fixed that eyebrow. You see it? I raised it up just a little bit and accented that. And now I think I smoothed it a little bit in order to get the look I wanted in some Ford's eye. But especially now with a lot more texture and weight. And yeah, you got to have one direction, one bank of lights on that scanning bed. It's good to pick up the depth in the brushwork. If they light it from two directions, it flattens it out. And sometimes you want that, but a lot of times I want to see that depth. So you want one direction on that. And email me if you want to talk about it some more. Tips for working on a paint. It takes multiple days, but you don't want your paint to dry. You know, the old guys used to paint right up to the spot where the sun was setting, and they knew they couldn't get any more done. So they would wipe off what they had painted up to the point where they knew they could work on it the next day. And then they would start in that blank area and paint wet into wet again. If that makes sense. Is that all about the medium? Yeah, you know, you want slow drying stuff. You want that to be wet all the time. Just use some linseed oil. That stuff won't dry at all. Don't use any dryers, and stay away from Japan dryers and cobalt cicative. Forget that stuff. It's dangerous. Use the stuff Gamblin is putting out. Galkit is brilliant. Or titanium white, that's Griffin brand. It's an alkyd resin based, and it dries very quickly. Any color that stuff touches will speed up the drying time. Hey, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. Yeah, I got some ideas for some Dune paintings, and I heard they were working on a Dune film. I was like, oh, great. Anywhere after Lightbox. I'm not sure, Anthony. Wow. Maybe watch my Instagram and Facebook, and I'll try to see if I can put something up on YouTube. I have a YouTube account there or whatever, so watch that. There's some stuff up there already, I think. Trying out a lot of different compositions and color schemes. How do you know when you've found the one? You're actually looking for the all, Lauren. The one. Oh, when you're planning illustration, I see what you mean. Well, actually, that's the same answer. There are many different solutions to the same problem. You'll learn this. And by hearing that from me, you're probably going to go, oh, great, thanks a lot. But I tell you, there are different ways to solve a solution. And then you'll find there are many solutions to solve the one problem. So it's about knowing yourself, being able to read and understand your intuition and your gut. What do you want? What do you want to see? Sometimes you'll be confused and distracted. That's part of the game. You're going to have to suck that up. It gets better as you go. I can tell you that. Every painting gets better than the last when you're focused. You will die. Christine. You bet. Yeah, you can get burned out after a long painting, but once you're finished, I get this energy that comes up. It's like, ooh, I want to do that again. I want to spread those brushstrokes even better next time. So yeah, I do hesitate, and I know the only way to get out of hesitating is to just start, no matter how ugly it looks, because from there it gets better. It's the same thing with writer's block. If writers only knew the way around writer's block is just to write garbage, and out of the garbage comes the pearls they're looking for. Are there some sections or elements of painting? Yeah, ooh. The sections I'd love to paint first, I want to paint all this stuff first, but I can't. I got to wait for it, Stephanie. I got to build it up, and it's agony. But the payoff, when you get to it, you get this dopamine hit that you can't believe, and it feels really good. What you love most to paint, elements you dread. I love to paint faces. Love to paint hands. What am I not crazy about painting? Leaves, like, tree limbs. If you're just doing a big tree, but the limbs themselves, I love. Elements I dread. I used to dread hands and faces and stuff because I didn't know how to do it. But I'll tell you what, you get into it and you start to love it, and then you can paint the most awful stuff, and you'll love painting it because the act of painting will kill your fear instantly after a while. Where can people inspire desire to world build? Yeah, Kipling. Read my Above the Timberline book. That'll inspire you. As artists, I think the artists really get that book. Favorite novel. Read Something Wicked This Way Comes, Ray Bradbury. Read The Halloween Tree. Read Dune, of course. Other novels. Read read Timeline by Michael Crichton. Phenomenal. There's a billion more books I could say. Read The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I'll leave it at that, but there are more, but read Dinotopia, read my book Above the Timberline, read A Dutch Treat by Rien Pourvillet, however you pronounce that. Dutch Treat, I'll repeat that again. Same guy that did the gnomes. Painting from memory, yeah. Most of this is painting from memory, if you can believe it or not, Nick. I got the reference sitting right there, and you're like, what? What do you mean you're painting from memory? No, it's odd. The more paintings you do, the more you're able to paint from memory, which makes sense, right? More shoes you paint, after a while, you know where the reflections are and stuff. So it takes time. But you want to do some painting from memory. You want to do paintings from reference. The only way you can keep the memory going is to paint from the reference, paint from reality, paint from life. You've got to do it all. There's not one way. There's not one ultimate way. You find that way, give me a call. But I'm telling you, you got to do it all. If you want to be well-rounded, then you got to round. You got to get round. So do all of it. Paint from life, paint from photos, trace, don't trace, draw all the time, and paint all the time. And when you get to be my age, you'll go, oh, I see what he's talking about. And maybe even sooner than my age. So don't worry about it. Just do it. And don't hesitate too much. See that? Now I'm using my finger down there. I love to read science fiction, Millie. Some fantasy, short novels. I don't like the big ones. I love spy novels. I love thrillers. But mostly I love science fiction novels. They open me up to all kinds of stuff. Thinking that almost allows me to understand what I'm painting. Wow, that's going to get philosophical. I better keep going on the questions. Gunslinger, you shoot with your eye. I love it. Yeah, that's right, Gerald. Thanks, man. Sort of other than brushes and paint. You really need paint thinner. You don't really need paint thinner. I'm discovering that, but it does loosen up some of the stuff. You can paint straight out of the tube, Anonymous, with a little bit of Gamsol, and you're good to go. Look, in the future, they're going to preserve whatever they want. Your chore is to paint the stuff they want to preserve. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Don't keep, oh, now I'm working on that. Wait a minute. Did that repeat? This feels like I'm repeating. Okay. No, I guess not. There it is. There it is. Working on it again. Okay. Once nanotechnology hits, they're going to say whatever they want. I really liked your Polaroid and hyper painting that you showed. Yeah. What is your process? Well, it hasn't changed too much. It's been mostly the process is just gotten more refined, I would say. Have we been to this stage? I feel like this thing is not repeating. Okay. Anyway, I've learned a lot more about brushwork, how to lay it down fast and quick, and to let it be is really important. Trouble up north. No, I haven't been able to. Thanks, Andrea. I'm glad you love the book. Haven't been able to paint polar bears in the wild because, you know, it's hard to paint while they're chasing your butt down the ice there. Or painting from the tundra bus, maybe. No, in zoos, go to zoos a lot, look up a lot of references, and use my imagination. Okay, we got 39 seconds, so we should do a quick zoom in on this guy. We have 2 minutes coming. Carly and everybody else, I might not get to your questions. So I'm gonna have to turn this off. I wanna thank everybody for being here. And I think they're gonna close me out in a second. I'm pretty sure this zooms in. If not, I will. There it is. Okay, there you go. There's a close-up on the paint for you, and I will leave that there. Thanks, everybody. This has been great. Your questions were phenomenal, and I want to do more of this. If you like what you saw and love this stuff, shoot me an email or talk to me on Muddy, whatever, and take a look at those 10 things. And then in a half an hour, I'm going to be sitting and having tea with Carla and Ian and Lauren Panapinto, and we're going to talk about professional practices and anything that pops up, I think, at that point. Look at this mess. It's all messy brushwork, right? But it comes together and it says Harrison Ford. It was a lot of fun. I suppose they will shut me out when this minute is over. Anyway, thanks again. I was just going to say this paint back in here was just to mimic rain and not actually paint rain. So there you go. I guess before you go, we may be doing a stage production at Northern Michigan University on Above the Timberline. I will keep you guys posted on that. That's it. Thanks for coming, everybody.